So no, I mean maybe from a finishing perspective, yes, possibly, but I didn't think that there wasn't a gaping hole from him not being there. But I'd certainly like to have him back. It's just that when he's in, you just don't have a real speed element on the flank because you're going to have to do something with Lamella. I mean, to have him on one side and Lamella on the other, that certainly worked, I guess, in the City match. But you're not bringing that element of speed that you have with Townsend and or Njai. So I think that's it's interesting. But I think it's good that we have that diversity within our squad that we can throw different looks at people. So
Yeah.
I like seeing him back. I mean, obviously he's a very good player.
So let's we talked a little bit about Liverpool, so let's talk some more about that. It's no secret that Klopp was going to get appointed to Liverpool, and I'm sure with noise about where it was Klopp going to go, probably sped up the departure of Rodgers. Liverpool have flattered to deceive again so far this season, having spent far more money than we ever did with the Magnificent Seven. So karma is a bitch when it comes to Rodgers bemoaning Tottenham not challenging for the title and spending 100 million. So
was it just as much as his mouth as his record, you think,
well,
that got him the sack?
yeah, he's the only Liverpool manager in recent history to have not won a trophy, having spent a minimum of 3 years there.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they were in the driver's seat and should have won the title a couple of seasons back, but they did what they have done often. And I think the catalyst was that Palace away game where they were 3-0 up and they drew 3-3.
Oh, right.
In a true Spursy fashion. So, I think everybody kind of looked at Rodgers because, let's face it, he turned us down when we let Harry go. We were looking for a manager. And, he saw that no one
I
else
wanted
could go
him.
there. And,
I'll be the first to admit. I wanted him. I fell for the whole character. Bit.
Right, and we saw him making an impact there, and then suddenly he just didn't seem to take it any further forward. Now, granted, they lost Suarez, we lost Bale, but we still managed to do well, even though we can belabor the point of the Magnificent Seven and how that experiment worked out. But we've been a little more consistent since we lost Bale.
Well, they're in a pickle.
Than they have.
They've spent a fortune. I think in dollars they've spent close to $400 million since his arrival there, and it's a mess. I mean, I wonder if Sturridge would have stayed healthier during Rodgers' 3-year reign there. I would imagine that they probably would have had better results, and maybe the pressure wouldn't have been so great on him. But I want to share a little story, and I heard this yesterday, I think, or the day before yesterday. I was listening to the Men in Blazers podcast, and Raj Bennett, who's an Evertonian, he did a deal where he went down to, is it Melwood, where Liverpool trains, and he was there to interview Rodgers, and he got a chance to watch practice before talking with Rodgers. And so, he watches his full practice and he gets introduced to Rodgers, and they're walking, and he says to him, he goes, "Oh my gosh." And this is the beginning of Rodgers' reign at Anfield. He hadn't been there very long. And Rodgers like, "Oh, you must be so caught up in the fact that you're on the same training ground as Paisley and Shankly, and tell me what that means to you." And he said that Rodgers taps the microphone, Raj Bennett's microphone, says, "Is this on?" And Bennett says no, and he says, "I don't care about either of those two." And I just I was blown away by that. So here's a guy, right, that talks about character. How can you say that about Liverpool has great history, and those two managers are at the heart of what they've done. Mm-hmm. And here's a guy, right, who promotes character, who's tapping a microphone going, "Is this on?" Unbelievable.
Anyway. Do you think Poch would ever say that if he was asked? You must be caught up in the moment when you think about Blanchflower, Nicholson and Berkshire. Now, granted, they wouldn't have done that at Hotspur Way, but in the same context, you think Poch would have said, "I don't care about those two," not for
Never.
an instant.
Never.
AVB would never have said it. Harry
Never.
wouldn't have said
Why
it.
would you?
So
And why would you ever even give a
I know.
journalist even the thought that that's how you are? I think that sort of maybe says it all about him. So
Yeah. Now, I must admit, when you were talking about the Sturridge situation, I thought having him back in the team the week before the draw with Everton, they looked a totally different side.
yeah,
He linked up well with Coutinho. We talked about it on the last podcast. I think was 3-0 against Norwich, wasn't it? I think, and they just looked a whole different team. I thought, okay, so that's a scary proposition having Sturridge healthy because he linked up well with Suarez, and that was a very strong partnership in the season where they almost won the title. And to have him healthy, you are absolutely spot on. They would not have finished below us last season.
yeah, I'd have to think that.
But you can't bank everything on one player.
No, and I think that's the real pickle that they're in, is that they've spent so much money. You'd think they'd have some depth. You think they wouldn't be so levered to a Sturridge performance, but they are. Look, enough of them. But let's talk about Klopp and what you think about the job that he will do. What do you think? How do you think their season will end up? I mean, will they threaten for top four, given where they are?
I think he's brought in right now to kind of shake up the team, shake up the club, and try to get the maximum potential out of these. Let's face it, some of the players that Rodgers brought in the summer were head scratchers.
Yeah.
Firmino, I mean, he makes Paulinho look good. And
they have their own magnificent seven of sorts.
Well, they do, and I think we relish in that fact. But it's, again, I hate to say it, so Spursy of us to play them in Klopp's first game. I harken back to last season, Pardew's first Premier League game at Palace was against us, and it always seems to be the way that when a club fires a manager, we're the next opponent. Now, I think our form is much better than Liverpool's at the moment, and having to play them at White Hart Lane is obviously something we prefer to do. If you look at the form guide, they're way down the bottom. They're in 15th, and we're in second.
Are we really?
Yeah, even with the draw at Swansea, we're still maintaining a good position in the form guide. But that all goes out the window when you're playing Liverpool. It's a meaty fixture, one that we relish.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
It's a match where in recent seasons, like City, we've not done well. So hopefully we can take what we did against City and apply that to this game, and we can get the win. But there's no denying the new manager factor is going to play a role in this. Liverpool are going to be up for it, and they're going to come at us early with a newly energized bunch of players that will want to impress a new manager. Now, regardless of that result, I'm going to go for a 2-1 win. So there's my prediction for that. I think he'll steadily improve the team for the remainder of the season. And with us, we'll be challenging for that top four spot. And they will do well. They'll definitely do better.
I'd have to think so too.
Yeah,
I mean, he's as good of a manager that you can bring into that situation. I view that situation as not terribly dissimilar from ours. I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of pressure when you spend the kind of money that you have. They have the additional weight of having, this not that we don't have history, but they certainly have league history. And they've obviously got big European title history, and so there's sort of lofty, unrealistic expectations. And I don't know, you can be the greatest manager in the world, but if you've got a board and a transfer recruitment system that's a mess, and you're organizationally sick, it doesn't really matter how good you are. I think what's interesting about this fixture is that we got the new manager syndrome, but he's got a lot of players that are out on international duty, so he's not going to have a whole lot of prep time. I think he'll probably keep things very simple. I'm excited that he's in the league. I think the Premier League is a better place when you have managers like him in it. I think we are. I think we are playing very, very well. The form guide, to your point, says it all. And I think we. I think we turn. I think we turn them over. I really, really do. And maybe I'm just hope springs eternal. But I just so many encouraging things that I took away from that Swansea in terms of just pure Swansea performance, in terms of just pure quality of play. And I just think that we're gelling. And I think these are players that enjoy playing with each other. You can see it, and as a result, it's enjoyable to watch. So I think we're going to win 49-0. Okay.
You've been watching too much of that throw ball stuff. But I think the caveat we need to throw in as well is, Klopp almost relegated Dortmund, a team that were challenging for the title, I think, the season before. So that's the X factor there. Is his character and personality going to be too Mourinho-ish to create some havoc at the same time as right the ship? And let's face it, they're a point behind us in the table.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're not that bad.
That's
right
absolutely
now.
right.
Everyone's talking doom and gloom about Liverpool.
Well,
that's why I think we were surprised when, you look at the Mourinho situation. I would have thought he's facing the chop in a much more intense situation than Rodgers was.
Hey, hang on. I got to interrupt you. How much are you loving this? How much are you loving what's going on there?
Secretly, I'm loving it because it's got to be temporary. I keep scratching my head saying, "Wow, they've lost again. They've been that bad again," and compounded with how poor they've been in the Champions League, as well as our friends from south of the river, which is also equally impressive. I just can't see that lasting long. However, a couple of more poor results in the league in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and I think that pressure is going to mount to the point that Abramovich does something.
Oh, it's so great.
You can't have another press conference where he's tossing the gauntlet down and says, well, they're going to have to fire me. Well, you know what? They probably will. And I don't think Abramovich is going to allow that arrogance to keep his checkbook closed and having to pay him off to go away.
You know what I want to see? Well, I want to see their demise. If you had to ask me, I could pick one of two teams to have an epic demise. Would it be them or the Woolwich? And that's an interesting question. We'll save that maybe for another day. But what I will say is this, and I can't wait to see this. I would love to see them finish, somewhere around the relegation zone, and watch the mass exodus of newfound American Chelsea supporters pledge their allegiance to Man City, because it'll happen. It'll be in droves, and there will be nothing that will make me happier to see that. Before we forget, I wanted to lots of stuff on stadium developments this week, and along with that, the trust. The Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Trust Board met with the Tottenham Hotspur Football Club Board, headed by Daniel Levy, and the trust has released the minutes, if you will, and we're going to have Katrina Law and Martin Cloak, somewhat of as an exclusive, next week to go over that meeting, and not just the bullet points that are on the sheet, but really get into the nitty gritty of the tone of the meeting, and have a very frank discussion there. I did want to mention, and you and I talked about this earlier. Look, we're part of a Spurs community, and to not acknowledge the great work that gets done in the community, I think is a fail. And there's lots of good people that we have gotten to know and have come to appreciate. And I got to give a shout out to the Cartilage Free guys, because they did some pretty cool stuff this week. There was a data dump, a document dump, if you will, on the Haringey Council website for all of these planning docs. And by God, those guys went through all of it. And buried in a construction report, they found a timeline. And the timeline, one of the things that it mentioned was demolition schedule. And it's moving target, and it's just a plan. It's not gospel. But it was interesting that there may be the possibility that we'll need to ground share as early as January 2017. So I want to give them a shout out for that, and I also want to give them a shout out for they did this incredible piece on the technology behind the retractable pitch. So I think they're cartilagefreecaptain.com. Want to point them out. I'm super excited for us to have Kat and to have Martin on for a very frank and blunt discussion about their chat with Levy et al.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the second time we've had them both on, although they weren't on the same show, kind of like last week when we had Rob and Julie on. We've had them on before, but in different scenarios. So, it is great. And obviously kudos to us, which we're humbly appreciative of their support and wanting to come back on again.
Yeah.
But I think this would be a great segue for us to promote that show with asking our listeners for their most pointed questions
Yes.
on what the trust does
Yeah.
for the supporters when they meet with Daniel. So I would recommend anyone to go read those minutes and then pose your question.